Why was everyone so tense before the meeting even began? The air inside the operations building felt heavier than the Norfolk humidity outside. Commander Winters crossed the quad with her usual measured stride, boots clicking against concrete in a rhythm that announced nothing and invited no conversation. She looked calm, too calm, for someone walking toward an ambush she didn't yet know awaited her. Flags cracked overhead in the morning wind. Another Monday inspection, another line of sailors stiffening as she passed. To them, she was just the quiet commander from logistics, sharp, efficient, invisible. 5 years of paperwork and precision had trained her to disappear inside the system she once bled to protect. She didn't mind. Predictability was peace. After Kandahar, peace, even in its dullest form, was a luxury. Inside, Lieutenant Farrow caught up to her, his tone low. "Commander, heads up. The Admiral's on a rampage." She didn't slow. New guy trying to make a point. Word is he's been digging through personnel files all weekend, looking for targets. "Good to know," she said, eyes forward. He could never tell if she was worried. That was the point. Admiral had arrived 3 weeks earlier with a polish to a mirror shine and a smile that never reached his eyes. Political connections, desk commendations, zero combat scars. He called it leadership. Others called it ambition with medals. In her office, checked the logistics report one last time. Delivery delays down 23%. Efficiency up across the board. She rubbed her shoulder. The old injury flared whenever storms rolled in, and the sleeve of her uniform slipped just enough to expose a black tattoo near her wrist. A stylized scythe. She tugged the fabric back down before the past could breathe. By 7:30, the briefing room was full. Department heads whispered in low tones that died the moment aides entered, arranging folders with the precision of soldiers stacking ammunition. The Admiral himself followed moments later, tall, silver-haired, carrying the weight of his own importance. "Let's not waste time," he began, voice filling the space like a warning siren. "Fleet readiness is unacceptable. I want answers, not excuses." For 30 minutes he dismantled presentations one by one, mocking, interrupting, using questions as blades. Experienced officers shifted in their seats, caught between anger and survival. When her turn came, stepped forward. "Logistics has addressed the supply chain inefficiencies, sir. We implemented a tracking system that reduced delivery delays by 23%. Frowned, that's it, Commander. The full report is in your brief. Key metrics are highlighted on page 3. He leaned forward. Be specific. Why are there still maintenance delays on the parts shortage from? We've established alternative sourcing. Resolution in 2 weeks. 2 weeks is unacceptable. The alternatives were 4 weeks with the primary contractor or compromised part specifications. Her tone stayed even. No apology, no emotion, just facts. It irritated him more than defiance would have. Captain Richardson watched from across the table, eyes narrowing. He'd seen this dynamic before, an insecure leader trying to provoke someone he couldn't understand. Winters didn't flinch. She absorbed the assault like stone absorbs rain. When the meeting ended, wasn't finished. "One more item," he said, "personnel reviews. Immediately following this session, all department heads present." Uneasy glances rippled through the room. Public reviews weren't normal. They were punishments dressed as procedure. Outside, Richardson caught up to her. "Strange approach to leadership," he muttered. "New command, new methods," she replied. "I know who you are," he said quietly. She stopped. "Do you? You look different from your file photo." Before she could respond, they reached the wardroom doors. Whatever he meant, it settled inside her like a tremor. Recognition was dangerous currency. Inside, chairs lined the room like a tribunal. Paced slowly, projection screen glowing behind him. "Naval excellence requires accountability," he began, the rehearsed cadence of a man performing rather than commanding. For 20 minutes he praised favorites, mocked others, and weaponized transparency. Then his eyes found her, Let's discuss Commander Winters. A file appeared on the screen, her file, riddled with black bars and redacted paragraphs. More hidden lines than visible ones. Evan's aides shifted uncomfortably. "Quite the Swiss cheese," he said with a smirk. "Care to explain these holes?" "Security clearance restrictions, sir." "Seems excessive for a logistics officer." He scrolled to a classified transfer. Naval Special Warfare Command, 2020. No unit listed. What happened there, Commander? Fail out of training. A few officers looked away. The insult crossed an unspoken line. "What was your call sign?" he pressed, too embarrassed to share it. The silence thickened. His expression didn't change, but the air seemed to tighten around her. Richardson saw her sleeve shift again, the faint outline of the scythe. He rose. "Sir," he said, voice cutting through the tension, "I can answer your question." Turned annoyed. "You know the commander's call sign." "I do." Richardson's tone softened into something close to reverence. "That insignia on her wrist, it's from Task Force." A pause. "She's Reaper 1. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then a lieutenant whispered, "That's impossible. Reaper 1's a ghost story." Senior officers straightened. Others looked confused. Forced to laugh. "What the hell is Reaper 1? Richardson didn't smile. "Sir, Task Force conducted the most classified operations in modern naval history. Missions still sealed even at your clearance level. Reaper 1 led the team that extracted the Moscow hostages in 19. Same operative who took down the network after they killed her team." The room erupted in murmurs. Someone whispered, "My God, that was her." Smirk faltered. If she were that operative, she wouldn't be pushing paperwork in logistics. Finally spoke, quiet, unshaken. "With respect, sir, where else would you hide someone who needs to disappear?" Before he could respond, his aide's phone rang. Urgent. He answered, listened, then blanched. "Sir, your access of Commander Winters's file triggered Pentagon notifications. Her Tier 1 security clearance has been reactivated." Across the room, more phones buzzed. Officers checking devices, whispering in disbelief. The communications specialist looked up from his laptop. "Sir, we're receiving priority calls from Naval Special Warfare Command and the CNO's office." Color drained from his face. Winters didn't move. Her gaze stayed on him, steady, unflinching. "Admiral," she said softly, "I believe this review is over." She turned and walked out. The doors closed behind her with a click that sounded louder than any reprimand. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Orders shouted, phones ringing, careers quietly recalibrating. But the image that lingered was the calm figure of a woman walking away from a storm she didn't need to fight to win. That night in her small quarters overlooking the harbor, removed her jacket and traced the faint scar along her shoulder. The wound had faded, but the ache never left. Outside, the sea reflected city lights like broken glass. She thought of the Admiral's face, the sudden fear beneath his arrogance, and the truth she had spent years burying. She hadn't wanted this exposure. She wanted quiet work, simple purpose. But the universe had its own timing for unfinished stories. 3 days later, she sat on a bench beside Admiral Vega, Chief of Naval Operations. No formal office, no staff, just two women watching ships drift across the water. "He's being reassigned," Vega said. "Remote post in the Pacific, administrative." Nodded, "Appropriate." "He didn't know who you were." "That was the point." "Was hiding helping." Watched a destroyer move slowly through the channel. "Some days," she said, "not enough." "The Kandahar operation wasn't your fault." "My team is still dead." Vega let the silence carry those words. "What now?" "I'd like something quiet, somewhere I can disappear again." "You could go back to the task force. They'd take you tomorrow." "I've seen enough war." Vega studied her. "The world hasn't seen enough of you." The words lingered after Vega left. Later that night, wrote a short note, sealed it, and left it on his desk. 7 words. Never mistake silence for weakness. In the days that followed, the base returned to its routines, morning formations, clipped orders, the hum of engines preparing to sail. Yet rumors spread quietly, like currents under calm water. Some said the Admiral had crossed a ghost. Others said a legend had walked among them unnoticed for years. Ignored them all. She moved through the station as she always had, efficient, invisible, but something within her had shifted. The secret was out, but the weight felt lighter, not heavier. For the first time in 5 years, she could look at her reflection and see more than a shadow of what she once was. In another office across the base, Admiral sat staring at the envelope she'd left. He read the words again, over and over, until the ink seemed to burn into memory. Pride had been his armor, now it felt like rust. Outside, the wind carried the faint clang of halyards against metal poles, a rhythm like distant applause or a ghost of warning. He finally understood what silence could mean. It wasn't submission. It was control. It was strength too deep to shout. And somewhere across the harbor, the woman he'd tried to humiliate stood watching the same horizon, knowing that some battles aren't fought with weapons at all. They're fought with dignity, and won without noise. Why had he come? The knock on her door that evening carried a hesitation she recognized instantly: guilt. When opened it, Captain Richardson stood there, posture straight, expression uncertain. The late sunlight fell across the lines of his face, tracing decades of service and regret. "Permission to enter, Commander." "Granted," she said softly, stepping aside. Inside, her apartment looked more like a transition zone than a home. Half-packed boxes, bare walls, a single duffel by the door. 5 years at Norfolk, and yet she could vanish in minutes. It was her way, never staying long enough to form roots. "Leaving us already?" he asked, glancing around. "New orders." "Where to?" "Not sure yet." He nodded. "You always this straightforward." "Helps avoid misunderstandings." They sat opposite each other, the silence stretching before he finally said, "I wanted to apologize for what happened in that wardroom. That wasn't my intention. I recognized your insignia and—" "You stopped him," she interrupted. "That's all that matters." "I just couldn't stand there and watch him try to destroy someone he didn't understand." Poured coffee, set 1 cup before him. "You were right about one thing. I do look different from my file photo." He smiled faintly. "That's not what I meant." "I know." For a moment they sat in easy quiet. Outside, the harbor wind brushed faintly against the glass. "I was in Bahrain when the story broke," he said. "Command couldn't believe one operative had taken down the entire network. Then the rumors started, Reaper 1. Some said she wasn't even real." He looked at her. "You made believers out of a lot of skeptics that day." Gaze didn't waver. "Belief didn't bring my team home." "You carried a wounded man 4 miles under fire," he said gently. "You saved 3 hostages. That counts." "It doesn't balance the ledger." He wanted to argue, but something in her tone stopped him. Some debts, he realized, were meant to stay unpaid. "Why logistics?" he asked after a while. "It suited my needs to disappear. Useful work, no attention. Operators like you don't just vanish. They do when they need to breathe." She took a slow sip of coffee, the kind of pause that said everything she wouldn't put into words. Richardson nodded, setting down his cup. "The Navy still needs people like you." "For what?" "Another mission." "For what you represent." He leaned forward. "True strength doesn't announce itself, Commander. It just endures." Her expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "You sound like Vega." "She's a wise woman." When he left, stood motionless for a long time, the weight of his words lingering. Strength that endures. The kind that doesn't need recognition. The kind she'd spent years trying to forget. Her eyes drifted toward a framed photo on the wall, 5 faces in desert fatigues, grinning under a blazing sun. Zephyr, Talon, Wraith, Cipher, the ghosts that followed her into every silence. She whispered their names once, like a ritual, then began packing again. The next morning, Admiral sat alone in his office. The blinds were drawn, the air heavy with the stale smell of self-recrimination. The transfer orders on his desk were stamped confirmed. Guam, a support command no one cared about, far from the Pentagon's glow. He read the note again, 7 words in neat handwriting. Never mistake silence for weakness. Each repetition felt like a verdict. When the knock came, he straightened automatically. Enter. Admiral Vega stepped inside. She didn't bother to sit. Her voice was calm, precise, devastating. Admiral, she said, I'll make this brief. Admiral Vega, I can explain. I'm not interested in explanations. The situation with Commander Winters is classified at the highest level. This incident will not appear in your record, provided you accept your reassignment without complaint. He exhaled with visible relief. That's very generous. It's not generosity, she cut in. It's operational security. You jeopardized an asset whose value to national defense you can't begin to comprehend. I had no way of knowing who she was. That's precisely the problem, Vega said, eyes cold. You weren't supposed to know, but you were supposed to treat every officer with respect regardless of their rank or record. You failed both tests. He bristled. With respect, my record speaks for itself. Yes, Vega replied, stepping closer. 28 years of service, not one combat deployment. Promotions through politics, not performance. Commendations written by people who owed you favors. You've built a career on image, Admiral, one that crumbled the moment you met someone who didn't care about your image. He had no reply. She left you a note, Vega added. You've read it. He nodded. Good, remember it. You'll need it where you're going. Her tone softened, not kindly but truthfully. You've spent your life chasing visibility. Maybe you'll find meaning in obscurity. When she left, sat alone again. He looked out over the base, the flag snapping in the distance. For the first time in decades, he felt small, and maybe that was the start of something honest. Months passed. Guam was humid, quiet, and dull. The perfect exile, went through the motions, signing forms, approving logistics requests, maintaining a shell of authority. His subordinates followed orders without warmth. The legend of his humiliation had preceded him. One morning his aide entered. Sir, Vice Admiral Vega is here to see you. Blinked, send her in. She arrived carrying a tablet. No greeting, no small talk. Do you know what this is? She asked. No, ma'am. The after-action report from Operation Black Scythe, Kandahar, 2019. The name froze him. You've been granted temporary clearance to read it, Vega continued. I want you to understand exactly who you tried to humiliate. He scrolled. The words hit harder than any reprimand. Ambush, hostages, casualties. Commander Winters sustaining multiple gunshot wounds yet continuing to engage. 27 confirmed kills. Extraction complete. 3 hostages alive. He kept reading until the medical report blurred in front of him. She shouldn't have survived, Vega said quietly. And yet she did. She saved others before herself. That's why they called her Reaper. Looked up, face pale. I didn't know. That's the point, she said. You weren't supposed to, but you were supposed to respect her anyway. He nodded slowly. She requested logistics after that mission. Any post she wanted, and she chose silence. Maybe ask yourself why. Where is she now? That's classified. Of course. Vega turned to leave, then paused. You're being reassigned again. War College. You'll be teaching ethics and leadership. Maybe you'll learn something this time. When she left, stayed seated. For a long time he didn't move. Outside, the tropical rain began to fall, soft, cleansing, relentless. He reached into his drawer, unfolded its note again, and whispered the words aloud. Never mistake silence for weakness. And for the first time in his life, he truly understood them. Far away on the Maine coastline, the woman behind those words stood on the porch of a small cabin, watching the waves crash against jagged rocks. The air was cold and salt-stung. She preferred it that way. Her new assignment was quiet, liaison to Coast Guard Northern Command, minimal contact, maximum solitude, the kind of duty no one volunteered for, the kind she requested. Inside, the cabin smelled of coffee and a single desk, a stack of intelligence briefs, a small safe beneath the floorboards. Everything about her life had become stripped down to essentials. The satellite phone on the table buzzed. Navspec Warcom, Task Force. She hesitated, then let it ring through to voicemail. When it rang again 10 minutes later, she answered. Winters. Commander. The voice was familiar, steady, gruff, respectful. Admiral, her former commanding officer. You're a hard woman to reach. That's intentional. He chuckled, still direct as ever. How's the quiet life? I'm still in uniform, technically. That's enough. Word is you've gone full hermit up there. Was there something specific you needed, Admiral? We want you back, Reaper. The word hit like a pulse from the past. I'm not that person anymore. The world still needs that person. His tone softened. We're rebuilding the task force. New intelligence oversight. The mistakes from before won't happen again. No, she said flatly. Listen to me. What happened in Kandahar wasn't your fault. My team knew the risks. They trusted me to bring them home. You did bring them home. Not all of them. The silence stretched between them, heavy and familiar. Just come to Washington, he said finally. Hear the briefing. If you still want out afterward, I'll sign the papers myself. When? Next Tuesday, 900 Pentagon. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. He hesitated. Did you hear about? No. He's teaching ethics now. A trace of humor entered his voice. Starts every lecture with your quote, never mistake silence for weakness, says it's his mantra. For the first time in months, smiled. A small, quiet smile that didn't reach her eyes but hinted at something close to peace. After the call, she walked down to the shoreline. The wind tore at her hair, cold and sharp. She picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water, 4 bounces before it sank, 1 for each of her team. For years she had lived with the ghosts of failure, but maybe failure wasn't the right word. Maybe survival itself was the burden she had carried wrong. Behind her, the cabin light glowed faintly through the fog. Ahead, the sea stretched endless and unknowable, like the future she hadn't yet chosen. The task force wanted Reaper 1 back. The question was whether Winters still existed beneath the quiet, the paperwork, and the carefully constructed peace. She touched her shoulder, feeling the faint ache beneath the scar, and whispered, "Not yet." But she already knew the silence wouldn't last. How long could she keep pretending the call hadn't already woken something inside her? Winters stood at the edge of the dock as morning fog curled around the pylons, the ocean whispering beneath her boots. The gulls circled in silence. She told herself she wanted peace, but peace had started to feel like a disguise that no longer fit. By Tuesday morning, she was standing beneath the Pentagon's gray, rain glinting on her cap brim. She had almost turned back twice on the drive from Maine, but the old instinct, that quiet, iron pull toward unfinished duty, kept her moving forward. She'd worn the uniform again, immaculate as ever. Yet this time, the black scythe insignia of task force was pinned openly on her collar. Security processed her without comment, though the guards' eyes flicked once toward the insignia. They knew. Everyone who mattered knew. Inside, Admiral waited in the corridor beyond, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "You came," he said simply. "I said I'd think about it. I thought about it." "Then let's not waste time." They walked in silence down the narrow hallways that hummed with recycled air and classified secrets. The task force has evolved, said. More oversight, fewer blind spots, we learned from Kandahar. Evolved, she repeated, the word dry on her tongue. That means more politics. It means fewer operators dying from bad intelligence. They stopped before a reinforced door, placed his hand on the scanner, then gestured for her to do the same. The lock hissed. Inside, a small briefing room waited. 6 people sat around a steel table. The air carried that sterile, metallic tang of high clearance and low trust. Commander Winters announced. Most of you know her by reputation. A tall, dark-skinned man in his 40s rose. Reaper 1 in the flesh, he said. Didn't think the stories were true. They usually aren't, she answered evenly. Colonel Delta Force introduced. He led the QRF on your extraction at Kandahar. Extended a hand. You were unconscious when we pulled you out. Glad to meet you under better conditions. Thank you for getting us home, she said quietly, shaking his hand. One by one, introduced the others. Vanessa, CIA liaison. Commander, Naval Intelligence. Captain Lawrence Hayes of the British SAS. And Dr. Carter, a psychological operations specialist with calm eyes that missed nothing. His tone sharpened. What you're about to hear is Level 6 classified. It doesn't leave this room. The projector came to life, flooding the wall with satellite imagery. Mountains, fortifications, movement. A former named began, her voice clipped. X. He's built a private paramilitary network operating along the Afghan-Pakistani border. He calls himself the Architect. Funding, personnel, and weapons all traced to the same source, stolen U.S. contracts and smuggled stockpiles. Added, we believe he's acquired chemical agents, VX-class derivatives, mobile labs. He's planning simultaneous strikes against U.S. military installations in the region. Studied the map, eyes narrowing. Underground. Mostly, said. Reinforced tunnels, old Soviet bunkers. Airstrikes won't reach them. Then what's the mission? Precision insertion, said. Neutralize, secure, or destroy the chemical agents, extract clean. His mind began to work automatically, calculating approach vectors, entry timing, fallback routes. You'll need at least 8 operators. 6, corrected. You, Hayes, plus 3 of your choosing. She looked up sharply. Me. Your medical restrictions were lifted last month, said. Vega authorized your reactivation. Realization flickered. She showed my file on purpose. Silence was confirmation. Leaned forward. We need Reaper 1 for this. Not because of the myth, but because you've operated in this region before. You know the terrain, the tribal structures, and froze. He was our primary intelligence source for Kandahar, said quietly. Her pulse spiked. The source who sold us the location of the hostages. He nodded once. We've confirmed it. The ambush wasn't bad intel. It was betrayal. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. 5 years of guilt, of carrying the dead with her everywhere, and now she knew the truth. It hadn't been her failure. It had been his design. She rose from her chair, the movement controlled but sharp. I need air. No one stopped her. Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant. She pressed a hand to the cool concrete wall, grounding herself. The memories came fast and uninvited. Cipher bleeding out, Wraith's last words over comms, the explosion that threw her into darkness. Appeared beside her, saying nothing. They stood like that for several minutes, 2 soldiers bound by ghosts. Were you ever going to tell me, she asked finally, if you didn't need me for this mission? He hesitated, eventually, when we had confirmed. Honesty still isn't your strong suit. Not in our line of work. He sighed, the sound heavy with years of command decisions that cost too much. Your transfer to logistics wasn't just to hide you. It was protective custody. We had to investigate what happened at Kandahar. Too many inconsistencies. "So you buried me," she said, "hidden in plain sight while you hunted a ghost. That ghost has chemical weapons now, and a vendetta." Looked down the hall, her expression tightening into resolve. "I'll take the mission." Just like that. Just like that, her gaze met his. "But I choose my team. I plan the operation. No interference. No committees second-guessing in real time." Nodded slowly. "Done." "One more condition," she added. "When this is over, I get the full Kandahar file. Every line, no redactions." "Agreed." She turned to leave. "Then we're done talking." As the door closed behind her, exhaled, the faintest trace of relief mixed with regret. Reaper One was back, but he wondered at what cost. 3 weeks later, dawn broke cold and silver over Beach, California. 20 SEAL candidates slogged through wet sand, dragging themselves over obstacles under the relentless eye of Lieutenant Commander. "Faster, Lambert. My grandmother moves quicker, and she's been dead a decade." The trainees pushed harder, gasping against the chill. Discipline was learned through pain, she thought, but she never asked of them what she hadn't already endured herself. When they paused for water, a young candidate approached, hesitant. "Ma'am, permission to ask something." "Make it fast, Mercer." "Is it true about Reaper One, that she was real, a woman who took down the network alone?" The others slowed their breathing, listening. The legend of Reaper One had circulated through the teams for years, half myth, half warning. Studied their faces. "In this line of work, the ones you don't hear about are the ones you should respect most," she said. "The quiet ones carry the heaviest burdens." Then, almost softly, "Now give me 5 more miles before breakfast." They groaned but obeyed. As their figures disappeared into the mist, phone vibrated with a secure message. She glanced at the screen. "Package confirmed. 0 casualties, coming home. R." She allowed herself a small smile, pocketed the device, and jogged after her trainees. Back in Washington, Admiral Vega sat across from in her office. 3 months at the War College had transformed him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something quieter, maybe humility. "The ethics program is progressing," he said. "We're using real case studies, leadership under pressure, moral failures, command responsibility." "Yours included?" Vega asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. My experience with Commander Winters has become instructive. The cadets respond to it." "What's the lesson?" "That authority comes from character, not rank," he said. "That strength isn't volume, it's substance." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And that leadership starts with seeing the worth in people who never demand to be seen." Vega watched him for a moment. "Perhaps there's hope for you yet." He gave a small, self-deprecating smile. "Maybe. May I ask about Commander Winters?" "That information's classified." "Understood," he said. "If the opportunity arises, tell her I'm sorry." Vega stood, ending the meeting. "Continue your work. Your students might still learn something from what you lost." After he left, she opened a secure terminal. The top-line report blinked in coded green. "Operation Silent Vector complete. Commander Winters, objective achieved, collateral minimal, target neutralized." Vega exhaled slowly. Reaper One had returned. Half a world away, dawn crept over a hidden airfield in Pakistan. The extraction team moved with wordless precision. Burned documents, neutralized compounds, quiet ghosts fatting into the desert wind. Sat on the ramp of the departing aircraft, helmet off, hair damp with sweat and dust. Her hands trembled slightly, the aftershock of focus unwinding. Across from her, handed her a flask. "Hell of a mission," he said. She nodded, "Dead." "Justice served." "Justice," she echoed softly. The word tasted unfamiliar. He studied her a moment. "You all right, Commander?" "I'm breathing," she said. "That's something." He smiled faintly, "More than most." As the C-130 lifted into the dawn, she looked out over the desert. a landscape that had taken everything from her once and, somehow, given something back. She wasn't sure what it was yet. Closure, maybe, or just the quiet knowledge that she'd faced her ghosts and survived again. Weeks later, on a small fishing boat off the Maine coast, she watched the sun rise over the horizon. The waves hissed against the hull, steady, cleansing. The nightmares had changed, not gone, but different. The phone buzzed inside her jacket. She answered without hesitation. "Winters." Vega's voice crackled through the line. "We need you back, Reaper. One more mission." His eyes followed a seagull drifting effortlessly above the surf. "When?" "Tomorrow, 900. You're the only one who can do this." She didn't answer immediately. The ocean stretched infinite before her, the same color as the sky. "I'll be there," she said at last. When she hung up, she looked down at the scythe insignia pinned to her jacket. The metal gleamed against the morning light. Silence, she thought, was never weakness. It was preparation. She hadn't worn the uniform this way in years. The weight of it felt different now, less like armor, more like memory. When Winters stepped off the transport at Air Force Base, the sky was washed clean after a night of rain. The city shimmered under a cold spring sun, but the calm didn't fool her. Calm was always the prelude. She moved through the Pentagon's security checkpoints with practiced efficiency. The guards didn't speak, but their eyes flicked once toward the insignia on her collar, the black scythe that carried 1,000 whispers. Reaper 1, some of them probably thought. The ghost who came back. Admiral was waiting in the corridor beyond. His hair had gone grayer since Kandahar, but his stance was the same, upright, unyielding. "You came," he said, relief flickering beneath his composure. "I said I would think about it," she replied. "I thought about it." He smiled faintly. "Then let's get to work." They walked through the labyrinth of corridors until they reached a room marked only by a biometric lock. Inside, the same small group waited, Hayes and Dr. Carter. The air was tense, as though the walls themselves remembered too much classified history. Gestured to the holographic map that glowed over the conference table. "Welcome back to Task Force." The words hit like a heartbeat she hadn't realized she missed. Nodded once. "Let's begin." The hologram expanded, revealing the mountainous terrain of the Hindu Kush, rugged, merciless country. Tapped a control, zooming in on a cluster of red markers. "This network wasn't isolated," she said. "They left successors, fragmented, angry, heavily funded. We've intercepted encrypted chatter referencing a new initiative called Helix. Unknown objective, unknown target, but the patterns match pre-strike protocols from Kandahar and..." His jaw tightened, meaning they're preparing another coordinated attack. "Likely multiple," added. "Biological agents this time. VX-class was only the prototype." "Who's behind it?" "Helix leadership appears decentralized," said, "but our best lead is a man named. Former bioweapons specialist for a private contractor, disappeared after his death." "Where?" "Border region near. He's fortified an old Soviet listening post. Satellite shows heavy movement." Studied the map, tracing routes instinctively. Two visible for insertion from the north. River Valley access. "Flooded," said. "You'd have to go over the pass." "Night approach then," she murmured. "Minimal thermal signature, 2-day trek." Nodded. "You'll assemble your team. 6 total including you." "I'll take," she said immediately. "Hayes for recon, for coordination. I'll need 2 operators, quiet ones, tier 1 level." "Approved. Pick whoever you trust." "Trust," she echoed softly, as if testing the word's meaning. "That's rarer than ammunition." Gave a slow nod. "Then use it wisely." Later that night, she stood alone on the terrace outside her temporary quarters, the lights of the capital sprawling below like circuitry. The city buzzed with life and ambition, yet she felt detached, an observer behind glass. Her reflection in the window caught her off guard. The uniform, the insignia, the faint scar on her temple. Reaper 1, the media would have called her if they'd ever known. But the woman staring back wasn't the myth. She was the cost. She closed her eyes, remembering the desert heat, the gunfire, Cypher's labored breathing as she dragged him through dust and blood. The memory never dulled, it only waited. When she opened her eyes again, the reflection was calm, controlled, the mask was back. The next morning, the team gathered in a hangar at Joint Base. 2 helicopters gleamed under harsh white lights, engines idling in readiness. Tossed her a folder. 2 candidates for your open slots. Both Tier 1, both ghosts like you asked. She skimmed the files. Chief Petty Officer SEAL Team 6, Sergeant Elijah Ward, Delta Force. Solid records, no disciplinary shadows. Good, she said. Brief them. Wheels up at 2200. Hesitated. You're sure you're ready for this? Would you ask that if I were anyone else? He smiled slightly. Probably not. Then don't start now. The corner of his mouth lifted. Fair enough. By 2100 hours, the hangar was alive with movement. Equipment checks, encrypted comms, weapons inspections. The air smelled of oil and adrenaline. Walked among them silently, watching how each person moved, their rhythm, their focus. You could tell everything about a soldier by how they prepared for silence. Was methodical, her dark hair tied tight under her helmet, movements clean and precise. Ward was quieter still, double-checking every strap and buckle like ritual. Worked on a portable uplink, her voice steady through the radio chatter. Hayes stood near the open ramp, scanning the weather reports with his usual calm detachment. Was beside her, adjusting his vest with the easy grace of experience. Approached last, the weight of command on his shoulders. You know the objectives, he said. No unnecessary kills. Secure the intel, confirms role in Helix. And if he's hostile, you'll know what to do. Gave a short nod, understood. He hesitated before speaking again. Vega sends her regards. That's not like her. She said you'd understand. I do. The engines roared to life. The team loaded in, the ramp closing behind them like a promise. The flight was long and silent, broken only by the hum of rotors and the faint click of loading a fresh magazine. Below them, the world turned black and infinite. Leaned back, eyes half closed. She wasn't praying. She stopped doing that years ago. But she found herself whispering the same words before every mission for them, always for them. Hours later, the aircraft dropped altitude. The terrain below shifted, mountains like fractured stone teeth, valleys swallowed by fog. 2 clicks to drop zone, the pilot called. Copy, replied. Helmets on, check comms. One by one, the team confirmed readiness. Remember, said over comms, her voice calm but sharp. No noise, no mistakes. We move like shadows or we don't move at all. The green light flared. They jumped. The night swallowed them whole. Thin air burned cold against her face as the parachute deployed. Below, the mountains looked alive, ridges shifting like sleeping beasts beneath the stars. They landed in silence, boots hit earth, gear checked, formation set. Move out, she whispered. They advanced through the valley, careful to stay beneath the thermal line. Hayes led point, scanning with infrared. Ward covered rear security, carried the uplink in a sealed pack, walked beside, reading the terrain like a language. Hours passed. The moon climbed higher. Every sound mattered, the scrape of a boot, the click of a rifle sling. Silence wasn't absence, it was communication. At 400, they reached a ridge overlooking the target compound. Old Soviet concrete, half buried in the mountain. Floodlights swept lazily across the perimeter. Armed guards, drones overhead. Looks heavier than the intel brief, murmured. It always is, she said. Thermals show 20+ inside, Hayes reported. No movement on the north flank. Then that's our door. They descended slowly, the ground slick with frost. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured. As they neared the outer wall, Ward crouched beside her. Motion sensors. I see them. She pulled a small device from her vest, an old piece of tech she hadn't touched since Kandahar. A pulse jammer, compact but effective. 30 seconds of interference, make them count. Copy that. The jammer buzzed softly. They moved 1, 2, 3 through the gate and into the compound's shadow. Inside, the hallway smelled of oil and decay. Old Soviet structure reinforced with new steel. Contact ahead, Hayes whispered. Silent takedown. They advanced as one. The blade flashed once, efficient, surgical. The guard dropped without sound, secured the corridor. They reached a control room lit by the pale glow of monitors. Data streamed across the screens in Cyrillic and Pashto. Began copying the files. Encrypted, could take time. Take it, said, we'll hold. The faint hum of servers filled the space. Then footsteps. 3 hostiles incoming, warned. Positions. They melted into the shadows. The guards entered, laughing softly, unaware. 3 muffled shots later, the laughter stopped. Clear, said. Pulled the final data stick free. Got it. Good, replied. Now we. A low rumble cut her off. The ground trembled. Earthquake, whispered. No, said, eyes narrowing. Self-destruct charge. Triggered remotely, confirmed. We've got maybe 2 minutes before this place goes up. Move. They sprinted back through the corridor, alarms blaring now in rising tones. Heat licked the walls. Exit sealed, Ward shouted. Secondary route north flank, ordered. Hayes, cut that lock. The explosion hit before he could answer, an eruption of fire and dust that threw them to the ground. His ears rang. Through the haze she saw pulling to her feet, firing back into the smoke. Everyone out, she yelled, now. They burst into the night as the compound erupted behind them, a flower of fire blooming against the mountainside. For a moment time froze, the wind carrying the shockwave across the valley. Then silence again. Turn to her, still think you're not that person anymore. She looked at the burning ruins. That person's the reason we're still alive. Hours later, aboard the extraction craft, she sat by the open hatch watching the sunrise spread across the peaks. Her hands were steady now. Approached holding the recovered data drive. We got it, Helix, network, everything. Nodded, good work. You know what's on here. I can guess. Hesitated. He knew your team's call signs, every one of them. This wasn't random, Commander. Didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. Some truths could wait until morning. The hum of the aircraft faded into the kind of silence that always followed survival. It wasn't peace. It was shock pretending to be calm. Commander Winters sat near the open hatch, eyes fixed on the endless stretch of desert below. The horizon glowed faintly, a fragile border between night and dawn. Her body was still in the fight, but her mind was already replaying it. Every second, every decision. They made it out, barely. Altitude steady, the pilot's voice crackled through comms. ETA, 37 minutes. Was opposite her, cleaning a shallow cut across his arm with field gauze. Remind me, he said dryly, why do we never get the easy jobs? Because the easy ones don't matter, she replied. Appeared holding a small metal case, the recovered data drives. Encrypted on triple-layer defense, she said. We'll need a secure lab to crack it. You think it's worth the risk we just took? Asked. Glanced at before answering. Depends what's on it, but they weren't protecting standard op files. This looked like communication logs, recent ones. Recent turned, as in post. Nodded slowly. Whoever triggered that self-destruct wanted this data buried, permanently. The cabin fell quiet. Even the rotors seemed to fade into the background. Looked out at the clouds. Then we'll find out what was worth killing for. By the time they reached airbase, fatigue had set in like armor. They moved through debrief protocol on autopilot, turn in weapons, secure evidence, medical checks. But no one was thinking about rest. Not yet. In a private room adjacent to operations, Admiral waited behind a steel desk. His expression was unreadable. "Mission report," he said. Placed the metal case before him. Recovered data from compound mainframe, partial personnel logs, encrypted intel exchanges, and reference files to Project Helix. "Eyed casualties." "None," she replied, "except the enemy." He exhaled softly, the closest he came to a smile. "Good work. The data will go to Cyber Command for decryption." "No," said, "we keep it in-house. If this was worth burying, it's worth guarding." Frowned, "You don't trust Cyber Command." "I don't trust anyone until I know what's in that drive." Considered her, "You've changed." "No," she said, "I just stopped pretending." Her tone left no room for argument. Hours later, deep in the secure analysis wing, the task force gathered around a bank of monitors. The drive was connected to an isolated system, worked the decryption keys with a focus that bordered on reverence. Lines of code flickered, collapsed, reassembled. Then finally the first file opened. A list appeared on screen. Names, dates, operations. Hayes leaned forward. "That's not just Helix. Those are NATO-designated missions." Scrolled down, eyes narrowing. "Operation Black Scythe, Kandahar 2019. The room went still. Pulse slowed. Her voice, when it came, was measured. "Open it." Hesitated. "Commander." "Open it." The screen filled with mission logs, encrypted communications between a U.S. intelligence officer and an unnamed informant tagged Ares 17. Messages timestamped days before the Kandahar ambush. Read aloud. "Transfer confirmed. Coordinates. Ensure Team Reaper proceeds as planned." His jaw tightened. "That's not Afghan insurgent code. That's NATO channel encryption." His voice was barely a whisper. "Someone from inside sold you out." The words hit like a cold blade. Stared at the screen, the reflection of data streams dancing across her eyes. 5 years of guilt and silence, and now the shape of betrayal. "Run trace logs," she said. His fingers flew, routing data bouncing through multiple nodes. "Wait." The screen resolved into a list of origin points. Then one line blinked, highlighted in red. "Origin Norfolk Naval Command. Access level, Admiral clearance." Exhaled slowly. "No way." Looked at, "That's where was stationed when." "I know where he was," interrupted quietly. A silence followed, heavy, electrified, the kind that carried too much history. His voice came through the secure line. "What are you seeing?" She stared at the monitor, the betrayal reflected in her gray eyes like a mirror cracking. "Something you should told me 5 years ago." It took hours to piece together what the files suggested. Back-channel transactions, off-the-record communications, credentials appearing in authorization chains for restricted intelligence transfers. Some of it looked deliberate, some of it doctored, but the implication was clear. Someone in orbit had sold mission coordinates too. Whether it had been himself or someone using his access didn't matter yet. What mattered was that the Kandahar operation hadn't been doomed by bad intel. It had been compromised before it even began. And the compromise had started inside her own command. When the lights in the lab flickered to sleep mode, was still standing there, unmoving. The others had gone to rest hours ago. Returned quietly with coffee. "You should get some sleep." "Sleep doesn't fix betrayal," said. "No, but it gives you the strength to confront it." Looked at her. "You ever lose a team?" Hesitated. "No, but I've lost good people to lies. It feels similar." Nodded faintly, taking the coffee. "The worst part isn't the betrayal itself. It's realizing you carried the guilt for someone else's crime." Sat beside her. You're not responsible for what happened in Kandahar. Tell that to their families. I would if it would help. They sat in silence for a while, the hum of servers the only sound. Outside, morning light began to filter through the reinforced windows, casting thin gold stripes across the floor. Finally stood, "Get the rest of the team, we're going to Washington." The Pentagon briefing room was colder than usual. Sat at the head of the table, Vega beside him. His nameplate lay untouched near the opposite end. He'd been summoned, but not yet arrived. When he entered, he looked older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something closer to exhaustion. He saluted Vega stiffly before sitting down. "You know why you're here," Vega said. "I assume this concerns Commander Winters's findings," replied, voice low. Didn't speak. She slid a printed page across the table, an intercepted communication log bearing his credentials. "Do you recognize this?" He read it once, then again. His face paled. "This isn't possible." "It's your clearance ID," said. "It's been inactive since I took the War College post," argued. "Anyone with access to my old command credentials could replicate that ID. The system wasn't secure." His gaze didn't soften. "You're saying someone used your access to sell my team's location." "I'm saying I didn't." "Then who did?" Looked at Vega. "Admiral, permission to speak freely." "Granted." "There were files I never touched, classified above my. After my reassignment, several digital clearances were still active for 48 hours before transfer. If someone exploited that window, then they had help." Finished. "Exactly." Entered holding a tablet. "He's right. The data confirms a transfer during transition window, traced to a civilian contractor network, AES Intel Solutions, defense subcontractor for tactical communications." Vega's expression darkened. "His old supply line." Exhaled slowly. The puzzle pieces locked into place, the betrayal, the ambush, the 5 years of silence. Looked at her across the table. "Commander, I didn't betray your team." For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other. Two soldiers who'd both lived on opposite sides of judgment. "I believe you," she said finally. The room stilled. "But someone did, and I'm going to find out who." Vega nodded once. "Then task force is officially reactivated." That night in her quarters, sat by the window, watching the storm roll over Washington. The rain traced ghostly trails down the glass, echoing the tremor in her pulse. She opened a small case and took out the scythe insignia, black, weathered, carved from steel. She ran her thumb along its edge, remembering the first time she'd earned it. The mission brief that had turned into a massacre. The laughter of her team before it all went wrong. "Zephyr," she whispered. "Talon, Wraith, Cypher." The names came like prayers. "You were right," she murmured. "It wasn't over." A faint knock at the door pulled her back. Stepped in, rain dripping from his jacket. "Sorry to interrupt. Vega wants you on the next flight. We've got coordinates." "For what?" "For AES Intel's offshore division," he said. "They're based in Cyprus. If we're lucky, we'll find the contractor who used credentials. If we're unlucky," he smiled grimly, "then we'll find what's left of him." Stood fastening her jacket. "Prep the team, we leave at dawn." As turned to go, he hesitated. "You really believe?" "I believe remorse when I see it," she said quietly. "But belief doesn't erase blood." He nodded, understood. When he left, she glanced once more at the insignia in her hand before pinning it to her chest. The metal caught the dim light, gleaming faintly like a heartbeat. Outside, the rain subsided into mist. The city lights blurred into a soft glow, and somewhere in the quiet hum of the night, the ghosts of Kandahar seemed to whisper again, not accusing this time, but waiting. She had carried their silence for years. Now she would make the world listen. Cyprus looked peaceful from above, an island drenched in sunlight and indifference, the kind of place where governments sent secrets to tan quietly by the sea. The task force transport banked low over the turquoise coastline, then disappeared into the glare of morning as it approached the restricted landing zone near Limassol. Winter stood by the open ramp, scanning the horizon. The Mediterranean shimmered below like glass, deceptively calm. She learned long ago that calm seas often hid wreckage beneath. "We'll insert here," she said over comms, pointing to a narrow peninsula marked by cliffs. "AES Intel's offshore complex sits just beyond that ridge. Private security, low visibility, the perfect front." Adjusted his rifle, checking his optics. "You think they know we're coming?" "Not yet, but they'll know when we leave." By the time they disembarked, the sun was already high. The air carried the salt-burned tang of the sea. The compound loomed ahead, a cluster of sleek glass structures masquerading as a research facility. Fences topped with sensors, cameras tucked discreetly beneath solar panels. Too sophisticated for legitimate civilian operations. And worked from a portable uplink nearby. "We've got access to the outer surveillance grid," said, tapping on her screen. "Give me 30 seconds and the cameras will think we're ghosts." "Make it 20, replied. "On me, Hayes rear watch." "Copy that." The gate slid open with a mechanical hum, admitting them into manicured silence. Palm trees, gravel paths, mirrored windows reflecting the blue of the sky. It looked like a paradise for deception. Inside the lobby, 2 uniformed guards moved to intercept. They never made it past the first warning. Weapon barked twice, suppressed. Both dropped silently. "Non-lethal," ordered. "They'll wake up," muttered, "eventually." They moved deeper, corridors lined with frosted glass, the faint scent of ozone from climate systems humming overhead. His voice crackled softly through the earpiece. "Thermals show movement on 2, multiple signatures. Could be a server room or something worse." "Let's find out." They descended the stairwell. The lighting dimmed, sterile white giving way to flickering amber. The sound changed too, less air conditioning, more machinery, a hum that resonated in the bones. At the end of the corridor, a reinforced door waited, coded and sealed. Crouched beside it, tools already in hand. "Give me a minute." He didn't need one. The lock released with a hiss. Inside, rows of servers blinked in rhythmic light. The hum deepened, a live, steady, mechanical heartbeat. Stepped forward, awe and disgust mingling on her face. They weren't just intercepting comms, they were replicating them. "Meaning?" asked. "Meaning this facility was cloning military transmissions, recording, altering, and sending fake orders to the field." Stared at the screens. The implications sank in like ice water. Kandahar's whole network all steered from here. "Someone been playing both sides," said. "Who's behind it?" Before anyone could answer, an overhead speaker crackled to life. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." The voice was smooth, European, educated, detached. It echoed faintly, bouncing through the metallic space. Raised his weapon. "Show yourself." A door opened on the far side of the chamber. A man stepped out, unarmed, wearing a light suit the color of ash. Mid-50s. Eyes the calm gray of someone who'd stopped fearing consequences. His finger tightened on the trigger. He smiled. "In the flesh, though I doubt you came all this way just to confirm I exist." "Step away from the console." "I wouldn't," he said lightly. "Some of those systems are, how should I say, temperamental." Muttered translation, "booby-trapped." "Correct," said pleasantly. "But let's not spoil the moment. Commander Winters, Reaper 1, yes, I've heard of you. It's almost an honor." Her voice was low. "You sold my team's coordinates." "I did," he admitted without hesitation. "But you're misplacing blame. I wasn't working for them. I was working for someone higher, someone inside your chain of command." "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't expect belief," he said, "only attention." Took a step closer. Who? Smile widened. You already suspect. The files on those drives only show part of the truth. Was a contractor, not a leader. He was taking orders from someone with far more to lose. Whispered, he's stalling. Maybe, said softly, but let him talk. Leaned casually against the console. Your Admiral has been busy these past years, hasn't he? Moving pieces across the board. Creating chaos just controlled enough to justify his task forces. He needed heroes like you, Commander. Symbols of necessity. Every war machine needs a ghost story. His heart stuttered, but her face didn't move. You're lying. Am I? His tone was gentle, like a teacher correcting a child. Who buried you in logistics, Commander? Who decided the easiest way to protect an asset was to hide her in plain sight? He didn't do it for your safety. He did it to keep you quiet. You were a liability. Too many questions about the intelligence failures that weren't failures at all. Took a step forward, fury barely restrained. Enough. No, let him finish, said quietly. Continued, his voice almost kind. The Kandahar ambush wasn't an accident. It was an experiment, an intelligence test to monitor response under compromised conditions. You were expendable, Commander. You and your team were data points. Rise to Admiral was sealed with your blood. Why? Demanded. Because nothing cements authority like controlled tragedy. The Navy needed proof of necessity for their covert expansion programs. The deaths of 5 Tier 1 operatives bought that justification. For the first time, his tone hardened, and now they need to erase the proof. His jaw flexed. You think she'll just believe you? His eyes met. I think she already does. On some level, she always knew. Raised her weapon steady, her pulse unreadable. You're going to tell me everything. Names, dates, transfers. He shrugged. I could, but then you'd have to face what that means. What does it mean? That your loyalty has always been misplaced. She fired. The bullet struck the wall inches from his head. His composure didn't break. You're predictable, he said softly. That's what made you effective. Enough games, said. Shut it down. Sighed. I can't. None of this is stored locally. It's live. And now that you've accessed the system, your location has already been transmitted to every agency in the hemisphere, including his office. The words hit like a physical blow. His eyes widened. He's not bluffing, the signal's broadcasting, we've been traced. Download what you can, ordered, then wipe everything. Smiled faintly. You can't erase ghosts, Commander. Maybe not, she said, but I can erase you. Before he could react, fired, a clean, precise shot that dropped him instantly. Crumpled to the floor, eyes still open in faint surprise. Exhaled shakily, Jesus. Knelt beside the body. There was no triumph, only inevitability. You should stayed in the shadows. Looked at her. You think he was telling the truth. I think the truth's rarely that simple, she said. But if even half of it's real, we've been fighting the wrong enemy. They extracted under fire. A private security force, mercenaries, arrived minutes after his death. The team fought their way to the cliffs, smoke and sunlight bleeding together in violent contrast. Haze went down with a shrapnel graze, but they made it to the zone. As the helicopter lifted, the compound exploded behind them. One last purge of evidence and ghosts. From the air, the island looked untouched again. Beautiful, silent, deceptive. Encrypted copy secured, reported. But there's more in the cloud. He wasn't lying about that. Nodded absently. The wind from the open hatch tugged at her hair. His office was flagged. Yes, real-time alert. He'll know we were there. Good, she said. Then it's time we had a conversation. Frowned. You planning to accuse a decorated admiral of orchestrating an ambush? I'm planning to ask him to his face, she replied, and I'll know if he lies. 2 days later in Washington, Admiral stood before the Pentagon window, the Potomac glittering behind him. He didn't turn as the door opened. "Commander Winters," he said quietly, "I wondered how long it would take you." Entered, unarmed but far from unguarded. "You always did like to stay one step ahead." "I heard about Cyprus," he said. "Unfortunate loss of a valuable informant." "He wasn't an informant," she said. "He was your handler." Turned slowly, face unreadable. "You think I orchestrated Kandahar." "I think you used it." He studied her for a long moment. "You want the truth, Commander. There is no clean version. Kandahar was compromised by forces outside our control. I buried you in logistics to keep you alive until I could prove it." "Then why hide it from me?" "Because you were broken. You needed distance, not answers." Her voice sharpened. "You don't get to decide what I need." "No," he said softly, "but I did, and you're here because of it." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air between them hummed with something dangerous: anger, grief, unfinished loyalty. "I trusted you," she said. "You still can," he replied. "Then prove it," she said. "Help me uncover who's still out there." He nodded slowly. "I already started. Wasn't wrong about everything. There's a larger network: contractors, politicians, rogue officers, and they're not done." "Then neither am I." His expression softened. "You'll have to choose justice or peace. You can't have both." She met his gaze without hesitation. "Peace is overrated." That night she walked alone along the Potomac, the city lights shimmering across the water. The reflection of the monument rippled beneath the wind, distorted but still standing. For the first time, she wasn't haunted by Kandahar. She was driven by it. The silence she'd lived in for years wasn't refuge anymore. It was momentum. Some wars didn't end. They just changed shape. And Reaper One had decided this one wasn't over. The city never truly slept. From her apartment overlooking the Potomac, Commander Winters could see the lights flicker across the water, tiny reflections of a system too large to understand and too proud to admit it was rotting. She had spent her life believing in structure, in rank, in rules. Now she was watching all three bend under the weight of silence. On the table before her lay the encrypted drives from Cyprus, half decrypted, half understood. Sat beside her, exhausted but focused. "Whoever built this network didn't just want to sell secrets," said, scrolling through layers of code. "They wanted control. Every global hotspot, data manipulation, fake intel leaks, operational rerouting. A shadow command running parallel to official operations." Leaned forward, meaning they could start wars without authorization. "Or end them," added quietly, "depending on who paid." The words hung in the air like a loaded chamber. Entered, still damp from the rain, holding 2 coffees. "You should see the chatter on defense channels. They're calling Cyprus an unauthorized engagement. Under investigation." "Internal Affairs?" asked. "Worse, Senate oversight. Someone leaked the operation details to the press. They're framing him as rogue." His eyes narrowed. "And me?" "They're not saying your name yet," said, "but it's coming." She looked at the encrypted data again. "Then we move faster." 3 days later, the Pentagon felt colder. Whispers followed her through the halls like static. She'd become both legend and liability, an unsanctioned operator with too many ghosts behind her and too many questions ahead. Vega called her into a secure meeting room. The door sealed behind them with a metallic click. "I'm getting heat from the Joint Chiefs," Vega said. "They want answers, official ones." "You mean damage control?" Vega's jaw tightened. "Don't mistake me for a politician, Commander. I don't play that game." "Then what do you play?" "The long one," Vega said. "Send containment until the inquiry concludes. You, on the other hand, are being asked to stand down." Silence was sharper than any protest. Vega sighed. "They're calling it administrative leave." "That's just code for exile." "Maybe, or maybe it's protection." "I don't need protecting," said. "Not anymore." Vega studied her for a long moment. You remind me of someone I used to be. Then you know why I can't stop. Yes, Vega said softly, and that's what worries me. That night met, and in a quiet diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the coffee never got better, and the air always smelled faintly of rain and regret. She spoke low, barely above a whisper. Under lockdown, Vega's hands are tied. The files we pulled from Cyprus, there's a name embedded in the transfer metadata, General Cole. Frowned, Cole. He's head of procurement for international weapons contracts. Exactly, said. He's been approving front operations for AES Intel and its shell corporations. He's the link between its network and DC Command. Leaned back, shaking his head. Cole's untouchable. He's on the Senate Defense Committee's good side. No one's untouchable, said quietly. Some just haven't fallen yet. Even if we prove it, said. Exposing him means bringing down the system you served. Looked at her, steady and calm. Maybe it's time the system answers for what it built. 2 nights later, the team infiltrated the Department of Defense archives. It wasn't an assault, it was precision. Ghosts moving through corridors that once knew their footsteps. Bypassed digital locks while kept watch, eyes scanning the corridor's mirrored glass. The hum of fluorescent lights above sounded like interrogation. Inside the restricted wing, found what she was looking for, Cole's authorization files. Thousands of documents linking military resource allocations to private research partners. AES Intel was listed dozens of times under pseudonyms. His breath caught. He's been channeling millions through black budgets, medical, energy, even humanitarian cover ops, all funneling data to one shadow network. Nodded slowly. The war machine pays itself. They downloaded the entire archive to a secure drive. Then, as they turned to leave, froze. Movement, East Corridor. Glanced at him, security. Negative, 2 hostiles, military gate. Quickly shut down the terminal. We've been made. Exit route. Emergency stairwell, 2 floors down. Go, ordered. They moved fast but silent. Voices echoed behind them, firm, controlled, not panicked. Whoever was tracking them wasn't a random patrol. Reached the stairwell first, kicking open the door. Move. They descended into darkness, boots pounding metal steps. Halfway down, a gunshot cracked through the stairwell. The round hit the railing inches from his head. Contact, returned fire controlled bursts. Grabbed, pulling her into cover. Keep moving. They reached the garage. Alarms hadn't triggered yet, meaning the infiltrators were still contained to internal security, but time was running out. A black SUV sat parked near the exit. Broke the window, it with practiced speed. They sped out into the night, tires screeching against wet pavement. Whoever that was, muttered, they knew exactly where we'd be. Looked out at the dark streets. Then someone fed them our location. Inside leak, asked. His voice hardened. We're running out of people left to trust. Back at the, decrypted the files under blackout conditions. The room glowed dimly with the reflection of code. The only sound was the rain tapping the window. There's more than we thought, said. Cole's not alone. He's part of a triad: Cole, Senator Briggs, and a defense lobbyist named Everett Sloan. They've been orchestrating strategic destabilization projects across regions, manufacturing need, selling response. Including Kandahar, asked. Nodded grimly. It started there, was their first contracted chaos agent. When he failed, they buried everything, including your team. Slammed a fist against the wall. They killed our own people for funding. His voice was low, not for funding, for control. The words came with a chill that even the rain couldn't wash away. She stood, moving toward the window. The city glowed faintly beyond, a mirage built on power. If we release this, said quietly, we'll be hunted, every one of us. I know. They'll erase your name, your service record, your career. Everything. She turned slowly, eyes steady. Then they'll erase a ghost. Met her gaze. You really want to go through with this? I didn't come this far to protect liars, she said. I came to protect the truth. The next day they leaked the evidence, not to the press, not to the government, to the people who couldn't be silenced, veterans networks, independent analysts, anonymous data hubs. The story spread like fire through dry grass. By sunset, Project Helix was trending across military forums and encrypted feeds. By midnight, Senate aides were deleting emails faster than subpoenas could be drafted. And somewhere inside the Pentagon, General Cole was watching his empire crumble. When the order came for her arrest, she was already gone. They found her apartment empty, bed stripped, walls bare. Only one thing remained on the table, her scythe insignia polished clean. And vanished too, off-grid. Their names never appeared on any manifest again. But the ripples continued. Investigations, hearings, denials, quiet resignations disguised as retirements. The machine had been wounded, not destroyed but bleeding. And somewhere out there, in the quiet between storms, Reaper One was still moving. Weeks later, under the glow of a desert sunrise, a figure stood near an airstrip in northern Jordan. The wind tugged at her jacket, whipping sand across the tarmac. A small cargo plane idled nearby. Approached, hood drawn, eyes hidden behind dark glasses. You sure about this? Nodded once. There's more out there, we only cut one head off. Where to next? His gaze turned toward the horizon. Yemen, then maybe Sudan. The contractors never sleep. Someone has to watch. Exhaled. Already scouting ahead, he said you try to go alone. I work better that way, she said softly. Liar, replied, smiling faintly. You just hate saying goodbye. His eyes softened. Maybe. They embraced briefly, warriors who'd learned to love through silence. As walked toward the plane, called after her, what if they come for you? Turned, the rising sun cutting a halo of gold around her. They already did, she said. I'm still here. The engines roared to life. The plane rose into the dawn, carving through the pale sky like a promise. Below, the desert shimmered, endless, merciless, waiting. And somewhere in the shifting light, her team's shadows seemed to follow her. Not as ghosts anymore, but as witnesses. Because the truth she carried wasn't vengeance. It was proof that silence, when wielded right, could break empires. Dawn came slow to the valley. The light crept over the like it was afraid to touch the scars below. The air smelled of dust and iron, and somewhere in the distance, a call to prayer echoed through the stillness, low, haunting, human. Commander Winters sat on the wing of the small transport plane, boots planted on sand, watching the world wake up. For the first time in years, there were no orders waiting, no mission brief, no chain of command. Only choices. The wind caught her hair as she closed her eyes, listening to the rhythmic pulse of the desert. It was different from Kandahar, but the silence carried the same weight, the silence that came after violence, after truth, after loss. She had exposed the network. The names were out. The machine was bleeding, forced to face what it had become. But she knew better than to believe in clean endings. Power didn't disappear, it adapted. And ghosts like her didn't vanish, they simply moved. 3 months later, in an undisclosed compound on the outskirts of Amman, she was still moving. The space looked makeshift, part command center. Old maps covered the walls, connecting pins of corruption that stretched from D.C. to Dubai. New faces joined the table, a patchwork of operatives, and soldiers who decided silence wasn't loyalty anymore. Entered, carrying a folder. Intercepted message from what's left of Cole's network. They're relocating assets to Eastern Europe, trying to rebuild under a new front name, Defense. Took the folder, scanning the pages. Same investors. Mostly, they just traded labels, not intentions. Joined them, hair tied back, exhaustion softened by purpose. We leak again. Shook her head. No, not yet. They'll expect it this time. We wait until they believe they've buried the fire. Studied her. You sure you want to keep doing this? You already tore down half the structure. You could disappear. Live quiet. She smiled faintly. Quiet isn't peace. It's just a different kind of noise. Tilted her head. You ever wonder what normal looks like? Civilians, beaches, no ghosts. Every day, said softly. And every day I remember someone has to stay awake so they can sleep. Her words hung in the air, not bravado, not pride. Just truth spoken from the edge of fatigue. That night she couldn't sleep. The compound was quiet except for the hum of generators outside. She walked out onto the balcony overlooking the desert. The stars here felt closer, like they remembered her. The past came back in fragments, Cypher's laugh, Wraith's defiance, Talon's steady hands on the trigger. All of them gone because of a lie dressed as a mission. And now she had unearthed that lie, only to find another buried beneath it. His last words echoed in her memory, justice or peace, you can't have both. He was wrong. You could have neither and still keep going. She looked toward the horizon, the faint lights of a nearby village blinking like fragile beacons. For a moment, she allowed herself to breathe, not as a soldier or an operative, but as a woman who had once believed the world could be saved by rules. Now she understood something quieter. The world wasn't saved by rules. It was saved by the few who refused to stop caring, even when it hurt. Days turned to weeks, filled with information, evidence, testimonies, whispers from inside the collapsing empire. The ripples from her leak had triggered investigations across continents. Cole had vanished, Briggs had resigned under pressure, Sloane's assets were frozen. But for every door that closed, two more opened in the shadows. One afternoon brought her a sealed package, no return address, government-grade encryption. Opened it carefully. Inside was a flash drive and a letter written in precise, military handwriting. You were right. Kandahar wasn't a failure. It was an experiment. I tried to stop it, but by the time I understood, the system was too deep to dismantle alone. You did what I couldn't. You forced the truth into the light. Keep it there. I see. Signature was faint beneath the lines. Closed her eyes for a long time before inserting the drive. The screen lit up with files, personnel rosters, hidden reports, internal directives, proof of every buried operation. Proof that the rot had reached higher than anyone dared to admit. Stepped closer. This could bring down half the chain of command. I know, said quietly, and the other half will try to kill us for it. Looked at her, so what now? She didn't answer immediately. The weight of the drive felt like a verdict in her hand. Finally she said, we finish it, all of it. The next operation wasn't sanctioned. There were no mission briefings, no glory, just purpose. They targeted Defense's data hub, a fortress of glass and concrete near. Layers of digital firewalls, physical security, satellite backup. For weeks they planned. Every detail measured, every risk accepted. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction. On the night of the strike, led the infiltration team through the fog-drenched forest, covered rear flank, managed the uplink remotely from Warsaw. 2 guards ahead, murmured. Nodded, moving like a shadow through the mist. The world had reduced itself to breath and heartbeat, precision over rage, clarity over chaos. Minutes later, they breached the compound server wing. The hum of cooling systems filled the air. Connected its drive, his final offering, and uploaded the files into his mainframe. A cascade of alarms began before she finished. Security lockdown, red lights flaring. Upload complete, reported. They're cooked. Extraction. North Gate, 3 minutes before backup arrives. Disconnected the drive and slipped it into her vest. Joined her, face streaked with sweat. Worth it, he asked. She looked around, the servers burning with data, the lies unraveling one by one. Ask me when it's over. They escaped into the night as gunfire erupted behind them. The forest swallowed the noise, leaving only the rush of wind and adrenaline. When the dust settled, the entire network had collapsed. The data wasn't just exposed, it was distributed, mirrored across independent servers worldwide. Every hidden transaction, every black budget, every operation. All of it public. The empire of deception was no longer a secret. 2 weeks later, stood alone in an airfield hangar in northern Italy, had gone underground in South America, was rebuilding the comms network under a new alias. The mission was over. But endings weren't what they used to be. She held insignia in her palm, tracing the worn metal edges. He had died 2 days after sending that letter, cardiac arrest, the report said. She knew better. Some men didn't die from failure. They died from truth finally catching up. A mechanic passed by, nodding respectfully. To him, she was just another pilot preparing to disappear. She stared at the insignia one last time before placing it on a crate beside her. Then she walked out into the light. The airfield stretched endlessly before her, the sky painted in muted gold. Every sound echoed, the creak of metal, the whisper of wind, the faint hum of engines somewhere beyond. She could left, she could vanish like every other ghost. But the world didn't need her silence anymore. It needed her voice, even if no one knew her name when they heard it. Later that evening, as she crossed into the city, a young reporter approached her in a crowded. He didn't recognize her face, only the symbol on the pendant she wore, the small black scythe. "Excuse me," he said cautiously, "are you the one they call Reaper One?" She paused, eyes calm, unreadable. "That's not a name. It's a mistake someone turned into a story." "But it's true, isn't it? You exposed them, you brought it all down." She smiled faintly. "No, I just reminded them that truth still breathes." He hesitated. "Will you tell your story, the real one?" Looked out the window. The streets alive with people who'd never know the cost of the quiet keeping them safe. "Maybe someday," she said, "but not yet." The reporter frowned. "Why not?" She met his gaze. "Because stories only matter when the world is ready to listen." That night, she walked alone through the narrow streets, her reflection trailing beside her in the rain-slick glass. The city lights shimmered on puddles like fragments of old memories. For a long moment, she stopped at a bridge overlooking the river. The water moved slow, unbothered by the noise above it. She thought about all she had done, all she had lost, and all she had learned. She wasn't proud. Pride didn't survive in the kind of places she'd walked. But there was something else, something steadier. Dignity. Not the kind the military polished into medals, but the kind that came from standing up when silence was easier. She took one deep breath and let it out slowly. The night seemed to breathe with her. When the first light of morning touched the horizon, she was gone, another name erased, another myth rewritten. But somewhere in some forgotten archive, her file still existed, a note handwritten across the bottom in old pen. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And that was enough. Because Reaper One wasn't just a call sign anymore. She was the reminder that even in the quietest corners of power, truth still finds a way to whisper.